From a not-so-fresh article, Polygon states that the $70 video game model is pretty much inevitable and how the next generation of video game consoles will impact our wallets. That sort of title and subtitle will understandably infuriate a lot of the gamers from around the world, especially during the trying times that we're living in. But what if I tell you that it's not just inevitable? What if I tell you that it's already here? Before we get into this video, I want to say huge thanks for those who supported me on this channel. You can do so by checking the links down below. Also, huge thanks to Zombie Chicks for the pledge on Patreon. You are fantastic. Now, in regards to video game prices, this is a discussion that I've had a while ago, and I think it would be as good a time as any to bring it up again, especially when we as gamers are spending both of our time and especially money on this hobby. This topic is even more important to be talked about considering how we, not just gamers in particular, are living in a time where it's incredibly difficult for us in general to work or receive any sorts of compensation for work, or at least depending on your job. I can't imagine a lot of actors getting work these days. So imagine having the temerity of publishing an article where gamers should accept the state that video games are going to be more and more expensive. Now, to be fair, everyone is affected by current year, including game developers. So I suppose just a little bit of cash to reward their hard work is not the worst thing to ask. But you know what is? Asking for regular consumers to pay $70 for games that are probably not worth that price, being made by companies that have a notorious history of milking the consumers of every penny that they could. Now, this is specifically on NBA 2K21, and these are all the prices for the next-gen console versions. Whether or not upcoming games are gonna follow this particular price, we don't really know, but we do know that the wonderful, kind-hearted, and generous folks at 2K Sports would publish this very fair and very generous $70 price tag, definitely without all of those bothersome additional pay-to-win microtransactions. Oh, speaking of sports games, did you know that FIFA 21 on the PC are the same as the PS4 and the Xbox One version, and not, say, the PS5 or the Series X version? Why? Because there were some features that the PC wouldn't get, such as visual upgrades. Yeah, it's not like the PC can handle visual upgrades. It's not that every PC game allows you to configure your settings so that most PC can run it. Then there are also the blazing fast loading times. Yeah, it's not like PC gamers have SSDs to run their games or something. Then there's the controller haptics, which allows you to sense the impact of shots, tackles, and the like. Sure. And the most authentic behaviors ever seen in sports video games. Sure. Now, we don't really know how much FIFA 21 and the next generation consoles will cost, but I wouldn't be surprised if it's gonna cost $70 as well, considering all of these improvements, and that is on the top of paying loads and loads of cash for predatory microtransactions that a lot of these FIFA fans really love to do for some reason. This has been documented many times already at this point, and it's not just your typical sports game that got predatory. A lot of game publishers went to court for this, some governments straight up banned them, the House of Lords had to get involved in this. Point is, it's your typical AAA business garbage whose model is less about giving the players an actually fulfilling gaming experience and more about opening a virtual casino where they have to pay an expensive entry fee. Literal virtual casinos in some cases. And you know what they say about casinos? The house always wins. But at least in real life casinos, if you win, you get cash and not, say, a virtual football player or an anime girl if you're into that sort of thing. The thing is, as I alluded in the intro, this $70 business model is not just inevitable. It's already a thing, except it's being disguised as something else. I think you might have seen the meme of that Mona Lisa painting, illustrating how video games and expansion packs work back in the day. That meme illustrates how the painting got more and more chopped off into little pieces, and you have to pay a lot more so that you can get the complete painting. Game publishers are gonna sell the base game, which is at least 80% of that painting, for the full price of $60, and then sell the rest of it for around $10 to $20 on the guise of season passes or ultimate editions. So now let's go back to that Polygon article and focus on the most common justifications in why video games should cost that much. I'm gonna address these arguments one by one and explain to you why none of these arguments can justify an increase for these prices. The first argument is how the cost of a movie ticket is steadily increasing, but the cost of video games are still the same. That doesn't really matter a whole lot. Unlike films, video games have many other means of monetary gains that are beyond its first purchase, such as season passes passes, ultimate editions, and even microtransactions. There are even video games that can not only survive, but also even thrive even without the first purchase. Video games are getting more beautiful, more dense, and more modern, and yet they still cost the same. Statistically speaking, compared to the previous generations, you actually get a great value in buying a $60 game because there are even more money per pixels or money per megabyte as time goes on. This is true, but it's missing another thing. The technology of making those video games are getting easier, more accessible, and even free. You can make video games using stock assets at the comfort of your living room. You can watch free programming, modeling, and design tutorials on YouTube. There are many free online courses out there and experts that can teach you how to do all of those things. It is definitely more dense, but at the same time, it is a lot easier compared to the many other times in the past. I mean, Bright Memory was made by one person. One person. And despite all of that, the cost of making AAA video games is somehow rising. It's already been proven time and time again that AAA video game publishers waste way too much money on marketing. They waste way too much money making pre-rendered trailers that don't actually show their games. How many times do I have to bring up Hellblade, a game that was pretty much mid-tier in terms of budget, cost significantly less to make than a AAA game, has the feel of a AAA game, and still sold a decent number of copies that rivals that of a AAA game. I'm sorry to all the game developers and publishers out there, but your inability to financially manage your projects is not for the consumers to bear. Then there's the discussion of labor, which is a rather controversial topic amongst the video game industry, what with the amount of employees and game developers being overworked and suffering lately. Again, your inability to manage your workers is not for the consumers to bear. Your ineffectiveness in managing time is not for the consumers to bear. Putting a much higher $70 price tag on a base game is a way for video game publishers to shift the burden of their ineptitude to the consumers, a way to tell them, we suck, so you have to suffer too. Even Polygon themselves acknowledge that game publishers are inept. They could have accentuated that better, but that wouldn't be a good look for their relationship with game publishers, would it? But then again, if your primary consumption of video games merely center on nothing but the latest AAA money milking simulator, I can't always blame the publishers for your irresponsible financial decisions and your, frankly speaking, god-awful taste. Seriously, what kind of smooth brain would just blindly accept to buy the same old trash every year? And yes, a lot of these game publishers are proven to be horrendously inept. Yes, they will shift that burden into you, the consumers, but only when you, the consumers, say no, that these publishers will listen to your demand. Oh, you wish. No, they won't. They won't listen regardless, and I will explain to you why. As I said many times in the past, human beings are stupid. But there's one thing that I want to clarify. It's not the human stupidity itself that I have issues with. It's the consequences of human stupidity that I have issues with. People being stupid is a natural thing. People making honest mistakes is a natural thing. It's something that you have to do in order to learn and grow. People knowingly making stupid decisions is another thing. People knowingly making stupid decisions at the cost of other people's lives is an even worse thing that always freaking happens these days. And that brings us into this topic. There's a point in which your irresponsible financial decision has turned from adults making irresponsible and stupid decisions that harm nobody into convenient statistics for the executives to rip more money from your average, innocent, and gullible consumers. There's a point in which your financial irresponsibility hurts everybody around you. These overly enthusiastic consumers, who I'm going to be referring to as whales, are influencing these game publishers to continuously milk other fishes in the sea. But the absolute worst part of this conversation is that even if you are the smartest, most money-saving, most responsible consumer that knows all the best of the best game deals and when to get them, you have one incredibly big problem. Your contribution means nothing. Oh, you're not buying games on day one? You're not buying all the season passes and the ultimate editions? You're only buying games when you decide to discount them? You're not a true consumer. You're not an important factor factor to be considered in our board meetings. What's important are the consumers who are loyal to us and buy all the season passes and ultimate editions in day one. What's important are the consumers who buy all the microtransactions we offered them, even if they're really stupid and predatory and leads them into wasting thousands and thousands of dollars. Remember in my last video when I say that social media has successfully distorted people's worldview because a small loudmouth minority dominates a significant portion of the flow of information? This is basically the same thing, except the loudmouth minorities are not being loud by going to Reddit and complain about stuff. They're being loudmouth minorities by buying said video games and proceed to consume even more of the video game's content. No matter how many times you complained in the forums, all of those complaints will be withered away as soon as the executives glance at the amount of profit that they generated from the really enthusiastic whales spending thousands of dollars on these games. To put it simply, in the language of big corporations, action speaks louder than words. The action of you spending money speaks much louder than how many times you complain on social media about their predatory microtransactions. Let's get back to the idea of you being a smart and responsible consumer who knows where and when to spend your time and money on video games, because here's the deal. You are a normal person. You're not some mindless drone that just accepts everything that the entertainment industry throws at you for no apparent reason. You did your research, you did your calculation, you conclude that the gaming industry is predatory, and it will stay predatory because not everyone is as smart and responsible as you are. And this regardless of how irresponsible you are with your financial decisions. Somewhere there will be 1 or 2 or 10 or even hundreds of people who have much worse financial decisions than you, except they make a lot more money than you when their utter foolishness contributes a lot more into the industry's leniency towards consumer exploitation. These are the people that the game publishers love to listen to, not you, the loyal, smart, and responsible consumer. You cannot tell me with a straight face that companies love consumers that are smart and responsible. If you are any of those two things, they wouldn't be able to gain profits, would they? And thus, the unfortunate reality of human stupidity has brought us into today, where game publishers suddenly decide that it would be a good idea to charge people more money for their product, or at least the scummy and predatory ones. No matter how many times you say that they should stop, they're not gonna stop because the ridiculously rich whales are continuously consuming their products without question, and you are too smart and responsible to be exploited by it, and therefore you're not part of the equation. This is not an industry that we deserve. This is an industry that the whales deserve. Not all of us are whales, and yet a lot of game companies think that we are. We consumers who have actual financial responsibility and the ability to think do not deserve this, and yet we got it anyway. For now, this is only limited to the sports game community, and unfortunately they're way too thick to comprehend a lot of these things that we're talking about. For any other games in any other genre from any other game publishers or developers, it might or might not happen. At the end of the day, game publishers are human beings. Mostly. I think the aliens must have slipped into some of them. Unfortunately, their ineptitude always gets rewarded by the small, loudmouth, but incredibly rich and lots of money-spending whales, and no matter how many times we speak against it, no matter how many times we decide to not spend our money to reward this, at God knows where, some moron is gonna buy it, whether it be the $70 games that have season passes, or the $70 games without season passes. There's never a point in which we do something that is enough to convince these game publishers that they should stop doing this stuff. But unlike some people, I can't always scold you for not being able to do enough. As I said in my previous video, the best thing that we can do is to survive. And I'd rather we figure out the way to survive together than continuously being hostile at each other or treat each other as traitors. The gaming industry is a predatory landscape that exploits the ill-informed and the most vulnerable people. It is our due diligence to inform each other about the many bad deals that are gonna appear and the many terrible ways that game publishers are gonna exploit the consumers. And the best way for us to survive is to actually buy games that are worth that price and support the game developers or publishers that are not greedy and can actually make product competent enough to be priced $60. While it is impossible for us to change the state of the gaming industry as long as these whales continue to exist, it is at least possible for a lot of us to be able to get through it without destroying our entire livelihood. And as a nice bonus, play some good freaking games.